Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Leland Vittert. Tonight, America is in an unusual situation. Never before has there been more evidence that vaccines work. Yet at the same time, vaccine mandates are falling apart, and members of President Biden's own party say the mandates are turning into a real problem. Politico reports Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan said during a meeting with business leaders, quote, "We're an employer too. The state of Michigan is. I know if that mandate happens, we're going to lose state employees, but we have a lot of the same concerns that you just voiced, and it's going to be a problem for all of us." In the past 24 hours, federal courts delivered another nail to the president's three-pronged approach to vaccines in the private sector. The federal courts have taken a dim view of the president's mandates. 3 of 4 mandates announced by President Biden have been blocked. Federal contractors no longer have to require vaccinations. The Biden approach to force vaccines or testing on private businesses through an OSHA rule has also been blocked. OSHA's not even trying to enforce it right now. And a federal judge in Louisiana said workers in the Medicaid facilities, which is about every healthcare worker in America in a facility that takes Medicare or Medicaid dollars, can't be mandated to take the vaccine either. But as usual, Washington can't seem to get out of the way of the American people. The Biden administration is doubling down on the mandates, and Republicans are spending valuable time in Congress pushing through a bill that the president will definitely veto that's going to overturn the mandates. We start in D.C. with NewsNation's Kellie Meyer, who chatted with the senator leading the repeal that will never happen cause. Good evening, Kellie.
Good evening, Leland. Well, Senator Mike Braun, a Republican from Indiana today, openly said this is a political tool to highlight in Washington what he says many other lawmakers are seeing in their home states. Here's what he had to say with us earlier today. Are there people in Indiana simply not getting the vaccine because it's being mandated by the Biden administration?
You would hope that that's not the case, but whatever the reasons are, it is in many places anywhere from 10 to 20% up to what I'm hearing, 40% of a workforce that could be at risk, and the employees don't like it, and of course the employers who have had to make everything kind of work out over time are saying, wow, we finally look like we're getting some type of rhythm of dealing with this. We've taken it seriously, and now here the federal government comes in and makes a bad decision, putting us in this peril.
Here's a question. Is President Biden... Braun and other Republicans and some Democrats argue this is also putting an added strain on businesses, where some business owners say vaccines are a personal choice. Leland?
Yeah, we understand, though, that this is falling apart in the courts. A number of federal courts have issued injunctions to all 3 of the Biden vaccine mandates. So why make this big deal on the Hill and something that's going to certainly fail on the Hill and might succeed in the courts?
Well, to them, it sends a message to the president that there is direct bipartisan opposition to the vaccine mandate. It's still unclear whether the measure will have enough votes to pass in the House. If it makes it to the president's desk, as you said earlier, the president is almost certain to veto this. But lawmakers here tell me that it shows the president is going against a bipartisan majority here in Congress and pitting Democrat against a Democratic president. I asked Braun why he is supporting this today. Is this just a show vote? Is this grandstanding?
This is a tool to point out politically how bad it is. There have got to be 25 or 30 Democratic House seats that are in places that they're hearing the same thing that I'm hearing back in Indiana. And that's at 80.
Leland, Democratic leadership today calling this an anti-vaccine proposal that would take away critical tools that could help end the pandemic. And they're currently debating this and getting ready to vote on this at this moment.
Debating it in the Senate. How would this work in terms of coming up in the House? Because Nancy Pelosi's the speaker. She's a Democrat. Wouldn't she just protect the president on this one?
What I'm hearing is that there is growing support from Democrats in the House for this as well. We're seeing that there's likely 2 Democratic senators here, John Tester of Montana and Joe Manchin of West Virginia, likely going to vote with senators here tonight, Republican senators. And from what I hear, there is some support growing from Democrats over there that they may pick up with this. And it's unlikely, but it could pass in the House and make it to the president's desk, where, again, he would then have to veto it and show that he is blocking something that has bipartisan support here on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see which Democrats if so, are forced to go on record in the House. Probably be interesting to see what number that is. All right. Hey, Kellie, thanks so much. We appreciate it. The Biden administration, as we've heard, is going to veto this if it makes its way to the president's desk. But they say that they're going to fight in the courts and in the court of public opinion for their mandates, despite the unpopularity and, as we've heard, political costs from both sides of the aisle.
The reason that we proposed these requirements is that we know they work, and we are confident in our ability legally to make these happen across the country.
Batya Ungar Sargon, deputy opinion editor for Newsweek, joins us now. Batya, what I can't get around why the Biden administration loves something that so much of America viscerally hates. But I have to think that there's some political reason to it in addition to the pandemic.
Look, I want to start by saying that I agree with your opening statement. This isn't only on the Biden administration. What you're seeing here is both sides playing politics with the lives of the American people. It is simply undeniable that if you voted for Trump in 2020, you are 3 times more likely to die of COVID right now. Any Republican who is out there not encouraging their own voters to go out and get that vaccine is really, it's murderous at this point. Now, at the same time, like you said, the vaccines are deeply unpopular. And what they contribute to is this sense of class warfare, where the Democrats and the administration are on the side of a tiny elite that doesn't want to let go of lockdowns and doesn't want to let go of zero COVID aspirations at the expense of people, small businesses, working class people, people who are essential workers who have been dealing with the pandemic since long before there was a vaccine. And then his pushing this, his overreach with the mandate is alienating people even further from trying to get that vaccine.
The White House isn't stupid. They see the same polling you and I do. They understand the same popularity ratings you and I do. What political group are they pandering to by continuing to say mandate, 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 even when the federal courts have said you can't do this?
I mean, I think that there is the temptation to say, look, they're catering to that same progressive elite that they're always catering to these days, right? The people who want that zero COVID, who are, the pajama class working from home. But I think that there is a reason to resist that. I really think that Biden has understood that his unpopularity is very deeply tied to the fact that we're not getting back to normal. And I think he sees it as backing down at this point to not pursue the pathway he felt would get us back to normal.
I guess the flip side is to sit around and say, look, vaccines work. It's on you if you don't get it. But if you get it, you're going to be protected. And the rest of us are going to move on with life. The other thing is the president continues to embrace, whether you like him or not, someone who is undeniably divisive in America. And that's Dr. Fauci. Take a listen to him today.
I would prefer, and we all would prefer, that people would be voluntarily getting vaccinated. But if they're not going to do that, sometimes you've got to do things that are unpopular, but that clearly supersede individual choices and are directed predominantly at the communal good.
I just can't help but hear when he says something like that. President Obama talking about people who cling to their guns and religions, Hillary Clinton talking about deplorables, Mitt Romney saying there's 47% of Americans who aren't going to vote for me.
Leland, I've started to see the resistance to the vaccine in some populations as another form of almost deaths of despair, a sort of protest against an elite that people are so upset and so alienated from the powers that be that they are willing to take their lives in their own hands just to say no to people like Dr. Fauci, who they see as looking down on them.
Yeah. Again, the White House realizes in 2022 that there's going to be 30 or 40 Democratic House seats that are in districts where it's not the pajama class that is going to win the election for them. You've got to get suburban moms who want to get back to normal and want their kids in school. You've got to get working class folks who have been put through the ringer during the pandemic. Where does the Biden administration decide to turn and go, okay, this isn't working, we're not winning those folks over?
I think it really is. To me, it seems like he has in his mind the idea that we can just get over this hump. If we can just get a certain number, past the 90% or whatever the number is, then things will start to go back to normal. And then maybe his approval ratings will start to grow. But I think it's a grave error. I think that these mandates are unconstitutional. I think they're going to create an unemployable underclass, which is just a disaster. And I also think that they contribute to that, class warfare where you're seeing, working class people seeing themselves as on the side of the non-vaccine pushers, the Republicans, as opposed to a highly educated Democratic elite, which is who they do seem to be catering to increasingly.
Yeah, and you point out, I think rightly, from the class sense, there's a difference between those who are pushing the vaccine but not pushing the mandates versus people who are pushing the mandates and saying, if you don't get the mandates, you're stupid and an ignorant redneck who's a Trump supporter and wears a tin hat. And on that, there's a decided difference between those two. Hey, Batya, your perspective on this stuff's always great and so thoughtful. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Instead of mandates, a number of cities are proposing just making life harder without vaccines. Call them pressure points, gyms, restaurants, malls before holidays. Chicago is one of them. Dr. Allison Arwady, Chicago Public Health Commissioner, joining us now. Doctor, it's good to see you again. First of all, congratulations. We took a look at Chicago's COVID hospital data. What to look for on your website. Fewer than 1,000 acute ICU hospital beds. Currently, only 392 are occupied. Fewer than 400 ICU beds occupied by COVID. Currently, 114. So I think we shouldn't have that in red, which should probably be in green. You guys only have a quarter occupied. Fewer than 300 on ventilators, and only 58 are on ventilators, so 1/6. It seems as though this would lead you to celebrate and say we should all get back to normal.
Yeah, so I'm really glad you looked at our Chicago data here, and this is exactly the data that we're looking at every day. You also saw that we are in the middle of a big COVID surge. The reason why, thank goodness, we've seen some separation between our very large number of cases, where we're up to seeing 1,000 cases a day again. We've not seen numbers like that for a year, but we're not seeing that turn into those are our highest cutoffs, where we would have major concerns about the healthcare system, is because of vaccine. And so where we have had a lot of people vaccinated, thank goodness, we are seeing some separation from people getting COVID, but then not being hospitalized or dying. And so, yes, I am reassured that at this point, we're doing much better than we would have been doing a year ago.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because we keep talking about how, on this show at least, how vaccines really do work. I've had 3 of them and had COVID, so I'm a believer. You think about a city like San Jose, California, has about 1 million people. We just sort of use that as a metric. Back in 2018, 2019, 152 people in that city of 1 million people would have died. 152 would die from the flu or pneumonia. If they were all unvaccinated adults, 138 would die. That's using the August Delta death rates. But if they're vaccinated, less than 20 die. And it begs this question, is case numbers really the right metric here? If vaccinated people aren't going to die, why should vaccinated people care really if they get COVID?
Yeah, it's a good question. While we are under reasonable control, the case numbers are all along have been secondary, honestly, in my opinion, to whether people are getting seriously ill, whether we're threatening the healthcare system. Obviously, none of us can tolerate the risk of overwhelming the healthcare system, where you can't get your care for your urgent needs. And we've seen that, right, early on in not just here in New York, but around the world. But the good news, I think, is that where we are seeing some of that separation, it is because of vaccine. Here in Chicago, we've had about 6,200 deaths from COVID. And over that time period, we've had literally a handful of influenza deaths. Even during a normal influenza year, we're only seeing maybe 300 or 400. So we are seeing a lot more deaths related to this. But you're right, the vaccine is helping bring it down. The problem is that when someone is not vaccinated or not otherwise doing absolutely everything, getting the regular tests, all of these things, they are absolutely putting others at risk. And so where we know that it is possible to get the breakthrough infections, for example, that's part of where there is some more pressure. It's not just about my decision for myself, it's for others too.
I understand that, but it's your decision also during flu season, whether or not to go out more people are getting the flu, even if you're vaccinated or not vaccinated. I guess it gets to the point. And what is the metric where we blow the whistle? Because COVID's going to be here forever. Cases are going to be here forever.
Yeah, and I think, I like this focus on what's happening with hospitalization data. We've been very clear in Chicago. We start threatening the healthcare system, we absolutely have to do something.
Right, but we're nowhere close. We're nowhere close to that.
Right. Well, and those numbers would really mark the point where we were at our worst point. What we are seeing, though, are increases, and where we're seeing these increases, including more breakthroughs and others, the risk does go up for everybody, vaccinated or unvaccinated. And I think as we're learning about, Omicron, what is that going to look like, et cetera, there are some more uncertainties. We're really proud in Chicago that since we fully opened last spring, we've not had to do any capacity limits. We've not had to shut down. We've not had to cancel any events. We've done some of that by having people show either a proof of vaccine or proof of a negative test. Our theaters do that. We did that for even really big events like Lollapalooza.
Sure.
It's one thing that you can do to help stay open. And we want to be past this. We've been enjoying, being able to go to the events that we couldn't have before. But making sure you're doing what you can to have those spaces be as safe as possible is part of being open, in my opinion.
All right. Doctor, welcome back to the program. We're always glad to have you. We'll talk soon, all right?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Merry Christmas to you and yours if we don't talk before. Inflation isn't going away, nor is COVID for that matter. Does President Biden have the political will to end the supply chain crisis? Plus, what college dating can tell us about the political climate of our country might surprise you with the numbers when we come back.
We had people at that time saying inflation will be transitory. We had 17 Nobel laureates saying it's going to be no problem. Well, 17 Nobel laureates were wrong.
That's Senator Joe Manchin saying what the Biden administration will not, that inflation hasn't gone away and injecting even more money into the economy. They may very well make things worse. Remember, Manchin is the key vote for the president's Build Back Better bill. But if you listen to Mr. Biden talking about his infrastructure bill today, the messaging on the, well, shall we say, it was on the other end of the spectrum.
I believe that 50 years from now, when historians look back on this moment, they're going to say this was the moment that America won the competition for the 21st century.
I guess this wasn't an understated President Biden today. He strongly believes his social spending bill will help ease inflation. That's what he tells us. Tonight, he's already celebrating gas prices. They have gone down over the past month, a whopping 8 cents. They are still far higher than this time last year, $1.19 to be exact. And Americans are taking note. More than half the country is experiencing a financial strain because of higher prices on everything from groceries to Christmas gifts. 39% blame the higher costs on the Biden administration. Perhaps we would submit there is a disconnect between the White House and the average American family. We bring in our most reasonable Democratic voice, Phillip Levine, former mayor of Miami Beach, also ran for governor of Florida. Good to see you, sir. Is the president right to keep sort of equating bipartisan infrastructure, Build Back Better, and making America's lives great again?
Leland, I think they're two very different things. I think the infrastructure bill is very smart. It's very positive. We need to do it. Now, in the Build Back Better bill, there are some things that are good. I mean, it's hard to say that we don't need to have some type of pre-K. I mean, we know how important it is for little kids. As a mayor of Miami Beach, the former mayor, dealing with sea level rise, we know we need help from the federal government. The problem is that this kind of money being pumped into the economy is going to make an existing problem that much worse, which is inflation. And when I hear the kind of spending, I say to myself, do I need to go buy Swiss francs? What do I need to do? Do I need to buy gold? I mean, where are we going? Because that's the issue. And I think that Senator Manchin's very smart. He understands it. And the Democrats are asking for too much too quickly. And I believe they should be piecemealing it little by little and see what America wants and what America doesn't want.
In fairness, most folks can't go buy Swiss francs. They can't go buy gold. They're watching gas prices go up and grocery prices go up and Christmas present prices go up, on and on and on. And they hear the president saying, it's not my fault. The answer is to simply spend more money. Does that resonate and pass the smell test of the average Democratic voter in Ohio or Iowa or Michigan?
No way, no how. They're seeing gas prices go up, like you said. They're seeing everything go up. They're saying to themselves, how can I afford to live? And think of this, Leland, what's going on. It's not that we need to create more jobs for people. We just actually got to get people to go take the jobs that are out there. People don't want to work. So by pumping this much money into the economy, we're telling people, you don't have to work. We're going to pay for everything. And like I said, there are good things in this program. There's no question, like pre-K, great. But do we need to be offering $900 tax credits if you buy an e-bike? Do we need to be offering assistance to local media companies? I mean, come on. I mean, this is a little bit too much. And I agree with you. And that's the issue with the price of goods are going up and the dollar is going to go down. And that is going to be hurting our purchasing power.
Yeah, Secretary Buttigieg told us that if everyone buys electric cars, then we don't have to worry about gas prices. Joe Manchin has been sort of the voice of the Democratic Party from a very red state, from West Virginia, but of the traditional working class ruled Democrat. Take a listen to how he views the bill.
The unknown we're facing today is much greater than the need that people are believing this aspirational bill that we're looking at. And we've got to make sure we get this right. We just can't continue to flood the market as we've done.
I said it before earlier in the show, the White House is smart. Do they just not care about swing voter, blue dog Democrats in these Midwestern states? Or do they think that they will just be able to run against a mythical President Trump in 2024 and those Democrats won't have a choice?
I think they're misjudging it. And I think Senator Manchin has a very cool, calm, smart mind that's saying what he's saying. The issue is this. Even if this were to pass and at $2 trillion, maybe going to $5 trillion real cost, they would not feel it, the American people, for a year or two or three. And I think the Democrats next year will feel it, but in a very negative way, because inflation will bite them hard and they're going to feel that. And they're not going to vote for Democrats with that. So I think we need to listen to Senator Manchin. Yeah. It needs to be smaller. It needs to be more well thought out.
Well, he said in his soundbite, 17 Nobel laureates keep saying it's going to be no problem. That is a subtle jab at the president, who every one of his speeches he talks about what Nobel laureates say about Build Back Better. Hey, Mayor, it was always good to see you. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Today, President Biden tried to reassure America's parents, in part of the speech you just heard, that the Christmas presents that you buy or want to buy are going to actually arrive. It is no secret that supply chain problems are a major reason that everything costs more right now. This is the headline from the Wall Street Journal. Supply chain problems will last through 2023. Intel chief says, he's the head chip maker. CEOs of Wayfair and Accenture each say the full recovery could take years, even though the situation in their minds is improving. Earlier this week, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said, well, the quiet part out loud.
But I think we also all know that as long as the pandemic persists, it will be poking holes in all of our supply chains and all of our supply-demand relationships around the country and around the world.
Which is why the administration will continue to say we need more vaccine mandates and the like. The Biden administration doesn't have the political will to end the pandemic and the empty shelves crisis. Well, experts say it could very well kill his presidency. For that, we bring in Glenn Richey, award-winning supply chain researcher, author of 80 peer-reviewed journals on the subject. Join us. Hey, Professor, we're glad to see you. Thank you very much. If the president were to, for example, nationalize the truckers union, declare a state of emergency so you could have National Guard driving trucks, nationalize the longshoremen's union, would that drastically change things?
Probably not. You know, one of the things that's been interesting about the current administration is that there seems to be this belief that they can kind of overpower the problems that we have in the supply chain, or supply chains, I should say. And the reality is that these supply chains are integrated across multiple countries, across oceans, lots of different players, players that include the Chinese government, who's actively involved. So, you know, expecting that we can mandate some things up at the top and have them trickle down all the way through the entire network of different companies is really kind of out there and hard to believe.
So no surprise, Republicans are blaming the president and a number of his policies on this, especially as it relates to energy. Take a listen to Elise Stefanik.
It has been a year of unprecedented crises because of Joe Biden and House Democrats' failed leadership. We call this Joe Biden's holidays.
So is the president completely innocent in any of these problems?
No, I wouldn't say he's innocent. And the reality is that when we see intervention in the supply chain, it tends to make things more complex, which adds more barriers to what we see in the movement. So as you try to step in and create situations where you're adding fines for different things, or you're putting different expectations on different suppliers, different delivery companies, that's going to slow things down. And there's 50, 60 years of research that shows that interventionism does that. And to some degree, we've seen that across the supply chain this year.
So that's the old line from President Reagan. The most dangerous words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. If he took away all of the help, would things then lighten up?
Well, yeah, there's certainly some areas where some of the restrictions that are in place could be removed. An example is truck sensors. We have sensors on these 18-wheelers that essentially talk about, tell people about emissions or proximity or those types of things. Just like the chip shortage, we can't get those sensors. So there are trucks all across the country that are sitting on lots, perfectly able to drive, but can't test their emissions. It seems like that would be an opportunity to take a step back, say, let's table this for 3 months, 6 months, a year, and then let's revisit it and make sure that our sustainability programs are in place. But when the supply chain's in crisis, those of us in the supply chain step up and do the job. And that's really what we're trying to do.
That's a great point. So you think about sensors letting trucks go, you think about lowering the age of drivers, you think about decreasing some of the union restrictions. Does this apply also to some of the energy policies?
Yeah, it definitely applies to the energy policies as well. We've been dealing with the energy policies now for a number of years. The ocean-going freight area has had big issues with that, and it's an impact on cost overall. So when you think about a truck driving into Los Angeles, to Long Beach and filling up their petroleum there, the cost of gas in that area of the country is going to have an impact on all of the goods that end up on that truck.
I just want to get back to this issue of the sensors, because it's something I hadn't even heard of. It's fascinating. So the issue may not really be that there's not enough truck drivers. The issue may be there's a lot of trucks that truck drivers can't drive because they don't have the right chips because of a EPA regulation to try and make the environment better.
Yeah, it's a combination of those things. We really do need truck drivers, but yeah, those sensors are a problem for us, and they're putting restrictions on things that we could potentially move and use.
You know, Professor, I had planned to make a comment about the Alabama-Auburn game as a big Tide fan, but because this was such a great interview, I'm not going to do that. And thank you very much for your time, sir.
That's okay. I have a degree from the University of Alabama, so we can be friends.
There we go. A screen divided, but still friends. Nice to see you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Democrats are losing the support of a cornerstone of their coalition. But big questions. Can conservatives capitalize on the support of this group? Plus this, tonight on Prime, Michael Vaughn, a missing Idaho boy, hasn't been seen since July. 5-year-old last seen walking through his neighborhood to find playmates. Where could he have gone? That's missing tonight on Prime. For the first time ever, Hispanics are now split on which party they plan to support during the midterm elections. Remember, this is a voting bloc that Democrats have long never even had to worry about. This is a new poll from the Wall Street Journal. 37% of Hispanics say they're going to vote Democratic, while 37% say they will support Republicans. That leaves 26% in the middle. Hispanic voters are also turning their backs on President Biden, a move that carries major implications for the midterms 2022 and beyond. 54% of Hispanic men and women disapprove of President Biden's job in office. That's compared to just 42% who approve. Keep in mind, Democrats have dominated the Latino vote. In 2008, President Obama won it by 36%. 2012, he won it by 44%. 4 years later, Clinton took it by 38%. And in the last election, it is narrowed. President Biden only won it by 30%, still a huge margin. These new numbers present Republicans with an opportunity to capitalize. Simply put, the current campaign strategy for Democrats isn't working. Erickson understands a thing or two about messaging, worked on President Bush's re-election campaign and election campaign, served as editor-in-chief for RedState.com. Rafael Banel is the Latino politics correspondent for our sister company, The Hill. Gentlemen, appreciate you both being here. Rafael, is Democrats yet worried about these numbers? And if so, what can they do to fix it?
Well, they do have to worry about the general numbers. This Wall Street Journal poll is a little bit strange because it uses a microscopic sample size, 165 Hispanic registered voters. So that's really not enough to reach the conclusion that the Wall Street Journal reaches. But the trend is showing Hispanics are moving toward voting more Republican. And what they can do to fix it, frankly, is keep on the outreach to Latino audiences, to Latino voters. And the thing is, Republicans are starting real significant outreach as well. And they're sort of learning the Democrats' playbook. Republicans won't catch up in California, most likely. They probably won't. But they've definitely caught up in Texas and Florida. And frankly, Texas and Florida are the two states where the Latino vote is most important.
Yeah, certainly. And you also think about as Latinos move into Iowa and Michigan and spread out in the country, it matters even more in swing states. Erick, do Republicans have an opportunity to reach out to Latinos on different issues than Democrats do?
To a degree, all they have to do is let the Democrats keep doing what they're doing. This has more to do with Latino voters moving away from the Democrats than necessarily the Republicans doing anything active to get them. You know, in the past, Republicans would send somebody straight out of college into a Latino Hispanic community and do their horrible Spanish to try to convince them that they were on the same page. And now they've just got issues. It turns out you treat Hispanic Americans like Americans, they relate to a little more. I mean, one of the things I think the Democrats miss, and by the way, to Rafael's point, he's right. The Wall Street Journal polling sample is very, very small, but we can get that there's something there just based on the presidential election trend numbers you saw. Look at the southern border counties of Colorado along the state line there. Those are predominantly Hispanic counties. They've been heavily Democrat, much like the southern border counties in Texas. They flipped to the GOP in 2020 and went for Trump. That was not anything anyone, including the Republicans, expected.
Yeah, Rafael, there seems to be this disconnect, at least as I've gone to swing counties in America, between the counties that Erick's talking about, which are sort of the rural working class Latino counties, and then the very progressive Latino groups inside of American cities. And this poll sort of shows a little bit to this. Hispanic polling on the issue of calling people Latinx. 40% of Hispanics are offended, 57% not bothered, 30% wouldn't support a politician who uses it. You'd think that would mean that Democratic politicians would never use the phrase again, but that's not happening.
Well, some aren't using it. I did see a tweet by Congressman Ruben Gallego saying he's banned the term from his office because of that. And really, I mean, it's become a platitude, right? That the Hispanic community is not a monolith in the United States. It's obvious, but it does sometimes appear like certain politicians don't understand this very obvious reality. And one of the biggest differences, I think, is between, and you pointed it out well, between urban and rural communities. You see a state like Nevada that depends on Las Vegas trending more in the California style, whereas Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico, they're sort of a coin flip with whether they'll go California style or they'll go Texas style. And that's really up to the parties to talk to these people and tell people in their communities what the politicians can do for them, which is what normally happens. They show up in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, also at the same time, though, you can't be so far to the left trying to cajole and ingratiate yourself to the progressives in big cities that you totally turn off voters in rural America. Erick, because you just have such a unique understanding of Republican politics, I want to get you on this. The Senate race in Missouri largely seen as a primary race between the attorney general there and the former governor there who had to resign in disgrace. His name's Erick Greitens. Hugh Hewitt, about as prominent of a Republican radio host as there is, present company excluded, talked to President Trump earlier today about Greitens. Take a listen.
Please don't endorse Erick Greitens. That's a nightmare, Mr. President. We'll lose that seat. But that's Hugh Hewitt's opinion, not yours.
Well, that's an interesting opinion. That's true. He's right now leading by quite a bit.
I know, but we'll lose the seat. We will lose the seat.
I understand that. Okay. Some people feel that.
The president doesn't seem convinced, but it brings up this issue. How worried should Republicans be when they've got these great opportunities like the Latino poll that President Trump comes in and endorses primary candidates who have no chance of winning in the general?
There's a real worry. You've got Erick Schmidt and Erick Greitens, the battle of the Ericks commented on now by Erick. And Schmidt is the attorney general. He's doing fairly well in the polls. Greitens does well with the base because he's perceived to be victimized. He was hounded out of office while he was governor. But that's a problem because Missouri does have a very independent-minded base of voters headed into the general election. Or you have the situation in Georgia with David Perdue and Brian Kemp, where he's got David Perdue now dividing the Republican Party in the supposed name of unity. The president has the potential to sabotage some races around the country that Republicans could.
I think you make a great point about Missouri independence. You think about that in 2016, President Trump won it by double digits, and Greitens only won by a couple of points, the governor's race. Hey, next time, Rafael, we got you back. You get the first word. We got to run. We apologize. Erick, good to see you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Keeping on politics, young Democrats are more likely to despise young conservatives. What that means for the college dating scene when we come back. Welcome back. It is now far, far more likely for young people to date someone of the opposite race than of the opposite political persuasion. For what it's worth, Democrats are far less tolerant of conservatives than the other way around. According to a new poll by Generation Lab, 71% of college students who are Democrats would not go on a date with a Republican. Compare that to only 31% of Republicans who would not go on a date with a Democrat. But it doesn't stop there. 37% of college Dems say they won't even be friends with a Republican, compared to just 5% of Republican students who said they wouldn't be a friend of a Democrat. With that, we bring in Leonidas Johnson, the host of Informed Dissent, to inform us on this one. Leonidas, explain this one to us.
Oh, man. It's a funny thing, right? The party of tolerance and inclusivity and diversity apparently is not tolerant at all and has no inclusivity. It's an exclusive party. Not even date people who have differing views. Listen, Leland, I've lost friends myself for having certain political views. This has happened to me, and I would never do that. I would never shut people out of my life because we differ politically. So there is a difference there. But here's the thing. But from a progressive viewpoint, progressives believe that they have the infallible truth, Leland, that their views cannot be challenged, that this is incontrovertible. And if you do challenge it, it's not just that you disagree, it's that you're a bad person. It's that you're evil.
You can no longer hold different thoughts. It's kind of interesting, though, and you think about it, because back in 1990, this is Pew Research, 63% of white Americans said they would oppose a relative marrying a black person. That number, as well as it should be now, is way down to somewhere in the low single digits. Has politics now taken the place of race to define us and who we are?
I think it works more like a religion. I think that people who are progressive, I think that politics has taken the place of religion for them. I think that they see themselves, they gives them purpose. It gives them some kind of identity, the way that a religion would. And the way that they handle things, the way that they have they have their high priests, they have their people, their inquisitors that go out and make sure that the heretics are rounded up and, the white supremacists die. But
you almost have to wonder a little bit, especially when I look at the 71% of Democrats wouldn't vote someone in the opposite party, date somebody in the opposite party. 31% of Republicans wouldn't. I have to wonder if that's most practical on the part of Republicans, because there's so few Republicans on college campuses. That's a conversation for another time. We'll see you soon, my friend.
All right. Thank you, Leland.
Awesome. All right. The word of the year. That's next. And my word of the year, too. Every year, the Merriam-Webster Dictionary chooses a word of the year. 2020, understandably, was pandemic. This year, it was vaccine, which got our team thinking about what other words perhaps we could honor this year. For a man who makes his living with words, and rightfully so, we bring in radio talk show host Tony Katz, Let's Go Bourbon author. The new book is behind him. What about supply chain? Did that affect us more in 2021?
It did, and supply chain should really be on my list. That's my mistake. I think, though, that's a late entry into the word of the year, which was, what was it again? It was vaccine? Was that the official
vaccine, which
word?
is sort of, that seems like the word of earlier 2021. I mean, if you think about late 2021, we could have gone with boosted, unboosted, conservatorship, if we want to pay homage to Britney Spears.
Right. Mandate was one of mine. Mandate was on my list for a word for 2021. But, you know, if we bring up bourbon, spirits are absolutely huge. One of the things COVID did was introduce people to the opportunity to kick back and have a drink. And 2020 was a big year. 2021, things like bourbon were down a touch, while tequila, and really premium tequila, anything premium, was up pretty gigantic. So that's something that people built into their lexicon. But vaccines kind of, I mean, it is the word of the year, but it's also a played out, exhausting word of the year.
Yeah, no, that's just kind of what I thought. So conservatorship, insurrection, I would think you would also agree is sort of burned out too.
Well, if only because only a certain percentage of the population is using it, and they all live in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, although we did think Insurrection Act was originally established in 1807. It has since been revived, as you noted, by the D.C. intelligentsia in 2021. Who knew?
Well, they did, and this is so much their story, still their story. With everything going on, America isn't thinking about insurrection. They're not thinking about January 6th. We can agree that it wasn't our best day, but we can't agree that it's more important to Americans than gas prices or that supply chain issue. It's just not.
You know, I always admire The Atlantic, and for no other reason than their ability to make up words, which may next be the word of the year in 2022. This was their original headline. Is it safe to hang out with the unboosted? And it's unclear as to whether or not they changed the headline because of mockery on Twitter or because their standards folks found out that unboosted is not actually a word. They changed it to how to safely socialize in the booster era.
Well, then you're going to have the boosterati. Right? That's a whole conspiracy thing going on. I just find it amazing that after all this, after everything we've been through in learning about this, we still think that unboosted is somehow a problem. Even when you hear Joe Biden talk about it, you'll notice he'll say that the CDC says, not that they point to a data point about what boosters actually do. I'm not anti-vax. I'm just pointing out that they're not pointing to a science.
Evidently, you can be, if you're an anti-vaxxer, according to Merriam-Webster, anti-vaxxers include those who oppose mandating mandates. So you can be an anti-vaxxer. That makes you an anti-mandate person, too. Hey, Tony, yeah, there we go. There's another definition. That's for late 2021, early 2022. We got to run, buddy. It was good to see you. The book is Let's Go Bourbon. Soon, Let's Go Tequila.
Amazon.com right now.
Premium
Amazon.com.
tequila. Hey, Leland Vittert Books is coming pretty soon. You're going to have some competition. We'll see you soon.
Ooh,
there you see, yeah, we got that. All right, Dan Abrams is next. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.